Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Odyssey with me, your host, Simon from the Odyssey team. I apologise for the lack of videos and voice notes and etc. over the last couple of weeks, but I have been rather under the weather, and you can probably still hear I've got a bit of a cold still. I've got a lot of updates coming over the next week or two, everything from FTX and all the rest of it. But today I want to talk about something that's quite close to my heart, and it mimics one of my favourite crypto books, which is a book by an author called Stephanie Kelton, and she wrote a book called The Deficit Myth, which is all about traditional finance and sort of like the myth around the term deficit, because we live in a deficit-based society, so everything is a bit myth-based. And I want to mimic that with the topic of this show, which is called the decentralization myth, because decentralization in crypto is a myth. And we hear it all the time, and we say, well, so-and-so, it's not decentralized, and that isn't decentralized. And the bottom line is that nothing in the world is decentralized, and there's always going to be central actors. But it mimics and it dwarfs the actual meaning of crypto, which annoys me. So I want to talk about it because it's really important to me, and it's really important for me that people understand the difference between decentralized and permissionless. And permissionless is a narrative that we should be pushing, because permissionless is what crypto is all about. If you think about where you live, whatever country you reside in, you have a sovereign currency. The rules and regulations around that sovereign currency are imposed by the government of the country that you live in. And some of them are imposed by international standards and cooperation, like money laundering and Banking Secrecy Act and things like that. We live in a system of rules and governance. And crypto is no different. Crypto is a sovereign currency. It's sovereign to whatever network it is. So, Bitcoin is the sovereign currency of the Bitcoin network. XRP is the sovereign currency of the XRP ledger. Ethereum is the sovereign currency of the ETH network. All of these networks have sovereign currencies, and those currencies are governed by the rules and regulations of that network. Now, the empowering thing about crypto is the technology and the fact that it's permissionless. Anyone can spin up a node, anyone can run the software. Excuse me, you can't make changes to that software, but you can run it. And that's the empowering technology. That's the empowering thing. So it is a sovereign currency that is global, and it has global access, and it has permissions and rules that are coded. And we can trust that code. And if the overall majority of the network agrees, then that code can change. Or if somebody runs a 51% attack, then a network will fork off, but you still can't push those rules onto the rest of the network that doesn't agree with you. And this is the empowering thing about technology. Now, if we want these technologies to interact with traditional finance, and we want these technologies to interact with banking and insurance and all of the things that this technology can interact with and can make life better and easier, then we are going to have to abide by the rules of the networks that we want to interact with. So this week came an announcement from Starling Bank, which is one of the biggest online banks in the UK, and they are a massive bank. They really came into play during COVID, when they opened their arms to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of new accounts and worked tirelessly. And the bank is great, and it's forward thinking. But this week they've put a ban on all crypto transactions, and not just card transactions, incoming banking transactions from exchanges and accounts and all the rest of it. So effectively they've removed themselves as an on and off ramp. Now, this is in light of everything that's been going on. So users from this bank have put their money into things like Celsius and Freeway and FTX, and they may have invested in crypto scams. And now, traditionally speaking, that liquidity that was in the bank has gone to the crypto network. And then it's been used, it's been misused, it's been taken. And that's the thing that we need to start looking at now, because crypto is a sovereign currency, and if you lose access to it, it becomes dead. It's effectively destroying money. So let's say 200 billion gets invested into a network, and the keys for that network get lost, and you can't take that liquidity out, and you can't do anything. That is effectively destroying money. It's still there, but it's completely useless. And we've got to really solve these problems, these custodial problems, these anti-money laundering, these banking secrecy problems, because we want a compromise. We want to be able to turn our assets into liquid assets, and we want to be able to turn liquid assets into crypto. But until we start cleaning the space up, and until we start governing with proper regulation and a proper compromise between the traditional systems and the new systems, and we need to get this out of our head that these are going to be sovereign currencies, like in the countries that we live in, because they're not. Governments control countries with sovereign currencies. That is a government's form of control. They're never going to let that up. They're never going to give it up. I mean, you see how hard the States fights to keep its world dominance in the dollar. And that's just one country imposing its tariffs on every other country. But you look at how strongly they'll protect the pound or the yen or the euro. They're not going to give this power and this form of control over to a permissionless network that they can't apply rules and regulations to. That isn't how this is going to work. But we need access to liquidity. So we need this grand compromise. We need it from the technology point of view to take Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. We need it from finance and banking to take us from this only sovereign currency to this globalized view, and how we can make the world completely interoperable and how we can turn it into a liquid planet where we can tokenize debt and we can use it and everybody can do it, and we can fundraise differently, and we can open access up to countries that don't have access. We can figure out ways of sort of making sure that sanctions lists are still upheld, and we have to get out of this anonymous transactional point of frame, because until we get out of that, we're not going to be able to interact with traditional finance, and governments are not going to give up control of sovereign currencies. It's just not going to happen. So, and we can't fight that battle from the outside because we cannot win it. We may be able to win it in 100 years, but we cannot win it now. And the key point now is adoption. And adoption requires cooperation, and it requires us to find a compromise between privacy and being permissionless. Decentralized is a myth. So because the developers hold the keys and the networks hold the keys, and you're going to have bigger players in networks and smaller players in networks, and there's always going to be somebody that's got more control and more power. And that's just the way of the world. But we can decentralize the people, we can decentralize everything else. But the key fundamental fact is the fact that they are permissionless. They are open to everybody. There is no inequality when it comes to crypto networks. It doesn't care about color. It doesn't care about race. It doesn't care about... It literally cares about code. So it isn't like you're going to have more of a chance of getting a bank loan because, you know, you're white, you're in your 30s, you get paid X amount, or it isn't like you're going to face any of that equality in a crypto network. You can just buy it. You can go to a decentralized exchange, which is still a centralized entity. You've got to remember that. There is a developer that's got access, that's got rights, that's got keys, that can do things, that can run that platform, because that's what it is. It is a centralized platform. It is not decentralized. And anybody that claims something is decentralized is a liar, because they're not. When it comes to centralized exchanges, when it comes to decentralized exchanges, they're exactly the same. So somebody's holding the keys, somebody's running the code, somebody's making changes, somebody looks after security. You know, it isn't like it's just out there floating and no one does anything to it. Somebody is managing that platform. So get it out of your head that these things are decentralized, because they're not. And then look at what crypto is for. It is a sovereign, permissionless currency. And that is the point. It is global, it is permissionless, and it is sovereign to itself, it's sovereign to its code. It isn't spendable. It isn't an asset. It isn't a cash. It isn't a fiat. It is just a permissionless sovereign currency of that network. Now treat it like it's your own. Do not give it to somebody else. Because that's the other problem with crypto. And this comes from greed. This comes from people who want to earn 40% APY. Now, these figures are not achievable. They're just not achievable. Banks don't offer them because they can't achieve them. And they are financially structured to get the most out of their money. Now, yes, their shareholders benefit and the banks benefit, and there is mass, bonuses and everything in banking that could go to people. Instead, they go to executives and all the rest of it. And that's what we need to concentrate on. We need to concentrate on giving that 3, 4, 5% back to people. Not the 40s, not the 50s, because all of these things that are going wrong are now caused by greed. Celsius offered ridiculous APYs, Freeway offered ridiculous APYs, FTX was the big hot ticket in town. Put your assets there, earn, stake, do whatever, and no, because all you're doing, the second you send those assets to somebody else, you are giving up your sovereign right to that asset. It is not in your possession anymore. It is not your crypto. And we keep saying this, and we keep looking. And at the moment, my big concern in crypto is a lack of access to liquidity, which makes companies insolvent. Now, it's great. If they've got access to 300 billion worth of Bitcoin, fantastic. Can they turn that 300 billion Bitcoin into cash? God, no. So that causes a run on the bank. And that makes these assets completely illiquid. And the more and more banks that take away access to liquidity, the harder and harder it's going to be to drive adoption, because the less liquidity it's got access to. We need fiat on and off ramps, and we need to actually impose KYC, regulations, AML, BSA. We need to compromise with traditional finance, and we need to work with traditional finance. We need to clean the space up. We are well past Silk Road. We are well past Mt. Gox, but yet we keep repeating history. We keep making the same mistakes again and again and again and again. We keep giving our assets to somebody else. We keep trying to make more out of them. We keep being greedy. We keep perpetuating the cycle. And all it does is it leaves a bitter taste in traditional finance's mouth, and it gives crypto a really bad reputation and a really bad look. This technology can literally change the world. It can give access to everybody. It can break borders, and it can do wonderful things. But it can't do it unless we clean it up, unless we make it so it can interact with traditional finance. We can't fight TradFi. We can't. We'll never win that sovereign war. We won't. As I say, 100 years down the line, if you've got 80% of the population that think the way that the current crypto folk think, fantastic. But it's going to take 100 years, and it's going to be a fight, and and we don't need to do that. We just need to embrace, and we need to cooperate, and we need to make the changes that we can make, and we need to fight the battles that we can fight. The only battles that we can fight at the moment are, okay, let's get rid of this whole that's being anonymous. We all use banks. We all pay bills in the real world. I don't know the difference between, a crypto knowing who you are and a bank knowing who you are. I don't see the difference between any of those things. This whole DeFi and this whole, it's privacy, and no, let's fix that. So, because we can do things differently. So we can monetize data differently. We can protect data differently. We can use crypto to make sure that people are rewarded for their own data. We've had good test bed experiments with browsers like Brave that reward the user for browsing in the Brave token, and that was a good experiment. We've had things like Coil that do micropayments to break down barriers between paywalls, so everything isn't a subscription, you just subscribe to one thing. These technologies have been worked on, they've been sandboxed, they've been tested, but we haven't driven any adoption. And these are the things that we need to start driving adoption on, and we need to start using crypto for what it can be used for, as opposed to trying to subvert governmental regulations. We need to stop that train of thought, and we need to cooperate much, much, much more. This is something that I'm really passionate about, because I want people to own their own data. I want them to be rewarded for their own data. I don't want Google to sell advertisements, and I don't want YouTubers to necessarily have to have 60,000 followers. I don't want sensationalized media that forces a narrative that causes so much disjunction in the world. And that's what this technology can do. It can clean that up. You know, you can be rewarded for reporting a nice story. You don't have to be shock and awe to get the ratings. You know, you can be rewarded for you choosing to share your data as opposed to somebody being paid for a mailing list that actually collects your data. So those infringements on privacy come from, again, it's a greed model, it's a profit-based model. And it comes from a system where we couldn't reward a user individually because there's no way to do that. Now we can. So we can give somebody an identity online that corresponds to that identity in the real world. And we can make that. And then we can have programmable money. We can have benefits paid directly to people. We can have a different way of doing things that gives better access and better ease. But we can't do any of those things until we start cooperating with the sovereign entities that we live in. And we can't fight those battles constantly. And we can't keep making the same mistakes. So we have to grow up. As an industry, we have to grow up. And this is more of a call to action for anybody that listens. Take control of your own sovereign assets. Be responsible, be sensible, don't be greedy. And when it comes to the decentralized myth, just understand that it is a myth. There's nothing decentralized. Everything is centralized somewhere along the line. I hope you enjoyed the show. Keep listening, keep subscribing, keep sharing, and I'll speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye.